History reveals a consistent pattern shaping global powers. Mastery over a crucial resource, not mere access. This control grants the authority to dictate terms, deny access to adversaries, and fundamentally influence economies worldwide. Throughout modern history, four distinct instances demonstrate how nations or blocs achieving a near monopoly on a civilization-enabling resource ascended to global dominance. In the 1800s, Great Britain commanded coal, the lifeblood of the Industrial Revolution. Every engine, every railway, every vessel relied on this black gold. Britain possessed it. The world required it, enabling Britain to forge the largest empire ever known. The 1900s saw the United States dominate oil, the engine of the modern age. Every automobile, aircraft, and military machine ran on this liquid fuel. America's plentiful supply made it indispensable to global needs, propelling it to sole superpower status. In the 1970s, Saudi Arabia and the OPEC cartel exerted significant influence over oil prices, not through absolute production control, but sufficient volume to manipulate global markets. This led to a dramatic price surge from $3 to $40 per barrel, crippling Western economies while enriching OPEC nations and starkly illustrating America's newfound dependence. Looking ahead to 2025, China holds sway over rare earth elements, 17 vital metals underpinning all contemporary technology. From smartphones and computers to electric vehicles, missiles, and fighter jets, China's dominance extends beyond mining. It controls 90% of global processing. Without these rare earths, the modern world grinds to a halt. This narrative unfolds the story of how strategic resource monopolies forge superpowers: Britain's coal-driven ascendancy, America's oil-fueled reign, Saudi Arabia's oil-based hostage-taking, and China's rare earth-powered trajectory towards future control. The underlying sequence is identical: discovery, development, monopoly, dependence, leverage, and ultimately, collapse. These 6 stages, observed across 4 pivotal examples, find us currently at stage 5 with China. The monopoly is solidified, global reliance is absolute, and escape seems improbable. Before delving deeper into this pattern, a clear understanding of strategic resource monopoly is essential. It signifies not just possession, but true control, the power to allocate and withhold. Strategic resources share 3 defining traits. Firstly, they are indispensable. Civilization cannot function without them. In the 1800s, coal was paramount. Without it, industrial progress was impossible, halting factories, railways, and ships. In the 1900s, oil was equally vital, powering vehicles, aircraft, and the entire modern economy. Today, rare earth elements are critical. Their absence halts the production of smartphones, computers, electric vehicles, wind turbines, and advanced weaponry. Secondly, these resources are non-substitutable. Wood cannot power an industrial-scale steam engine, nor coal a jet. Smartphone screens cannot be manufactured without rare earth elements. The technology fundamentally requires them. Thirdly, they are geographically concentrated, unevenly distributed across the globe. A select few regions possess them, while most do not. Consequently, a nation controlling these key locations gains power over all those who depend on them. When a nation achieves monopoly control over a strategic resource, it acquires 3 distinct forms of power: economic power, enabling them to dictate prices, manage supply, and extract wealth from others; military power, allowing them to fuel their own forces while crippling adversaries through denial of essential resources, blockades, or sanctions, effectively rivaling other militaries without direct confrontation; political power, empowering them to compel concessions from other nations through threats of resource cutoff or economic paralysis. The essence of leverage, the most potent force in geopolitics. 4 times in modern history, a nation or coalition has attained this critical leverage. Let us examine how this transpired and how they wielded it. Britain in the 1800s harnessed coal. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, human and animal labor, along with wind and water power, constituted the world's energy sources, severely limiting production and wealth. Coal introduced concentrated energy, capable of powering machinery through steam, multiplying human labor exponentially. One factory could achieve the output of 1,000 men. One train could transport goods far faster than 100 horses, and steamships could traverse oceans irrespective of wind. Coal ignited the Industrial Revolution, and Britain possessed vast reserves. The British Isles were rich in coal deposits. By 1800, Britain was extracting 10 million tons annually, soaring to 50 million tons by 1850, and a staggering 225 million tons by 1900. Britain not only mined this coal, but also developed the infrastructure to utilize it, powering its factories, railways, and steamships. This industrial head start, spanning 50 years, granted unparalleled advantage. This coal monopoly yielded immense economic dominance. British factories produced goods more affordably than any competitor, its railways transported them more efficiently, and its ships dominated global trade routes. By 1850, Britain accounted for over 50% of the world's coal, iron, and textile production, effectively serving as the global manufacturing hub. It also conferred military dominance. The British Navy transitioned from sail to steam, with coal-fired warships offering superior speed, reliability, and independence from wind. By 1880, the Royal Navy boasted over 300 such vessels, the largest and most advanced fleet ever assembled, all fueled by British coal. Furthermore, it provided political dominance. Britain controlled not only coal extraction, but also its supply routes, establishing coaling stations in strategic locations like Gibraltar, Egypt, India, Singapore, and South Africa. Any nation seeking to project naval power required access to coal, a resource Britain controlled. This was the ultimate leverage. By 1900, Britain governed 25% of the Earth's landmass, encompassing 400 million people, forming the largest empire in human history, all built upon coal. The control of this single strategic resource propelled a century of British supremacy. However, such monopolies are ephemeral. Other nations like Germany and America industrialized, discovering their own coal reserves. By 1914, Britain's coal monopoly had eroded. While the empire endured for another 4 decades, its foundational resource was being supplanted by oil, the strategic resource of the 1900s. America's dominance in oil began in 1859 with Edwin Drake's first commercial oil well in Pennsylvania. Initially used for kerosene lamps as a whale oil substitute, oil's significance escalated dramatically with the advent of the internal combustion engine. It became the essential fuel for automobiles, trucks, and ships, many of which converted from coal. By the 1920s, oil was indispensable, and America possessed abundant domestic supplies. Following initial discoveries in Pennsylvania, major oil fields emerged in Texas, Oklahoma, and California. By 1920, the United States was producing 60% of the world's oil, boasting vast reserves, low extraction costs, and a substantial domestic market. America not only produced oil, but also constructed the extensive infrastructure supporting its use: refineries, pipelines, gas stations, highways, and suburban developments, all designed around cheap, abundant oil. World War II underscored oil's strategic importance. Germany's desperate quest for oil led to the invasion of the Caucasus, a campaign that ended in failure. Japan's reliance on oil prompted an American embargo, a key trigger for the attack on Pearl Harbor. Japan gambled on war, unable to sustain its operations without oil, and ultimately lost. The Allied victory was partly attributed to America's secure oil supply, fueling not only its own military but also those of Britain and the Soviet Union, while Germany and Japan faced severe fuel shortages. By 1945, America had definitively proven oil's strategic value and maintained its abundant supply. In the post-war era, the U.S. produced nearly 50% of global oil, mirroring the role Saudi Arabia would later play. This abundance fueled economic booms, mass consumption, and the expansion of suburbs and highways, all predicated on cheap oil. The U.S. military, the largest oil consumer globally by 1950, relied heavily on oil-powered tanks, planes, and ships, backed by a secure domestic supply. This oil monopoly bestowed significant economic dominance, ushering in the American century with its associated consumer economy, cheap transportation, and abundant goods. It also provided military dominance, enabling the projection of power worldwide through carrier groups, strategic bombers, and global bases, all powered by oil. Politically, this dominance underpinned the Bretton Woods system and the dollar's status as the reserve currency, largely accepted due to America's economic and military might, both inextricably linked to its oil preeminence. By 1970, America stood as the world's sole superpower, the wealthiest nation with the strongest military, a position built upon its oil dominance. However, akin to Britain's coal monopoly, America's oil monopoly proved unsustainable. U.S. oil production peaked in the 1970s, and consumption outpaced production, creating a critical vulnerability. This paved the way for Saudi Arabia and the OPEC cartel to assert control. By 1970, U.S. oil production had plateaued at approximately 10 million barrels daily, while consumption reached 15 million barrels, necessitating significant imports, primarily from the Middle East. Saudi Arabia, possessing vast oil reserves discovered in the 1930s, saw its production surge in the 1950s and 60s. By 1970, it was producing 4 million barrels per day, a substantial volume capable of influencing global markets. The Saudis recognized that absolute production control wasn't necessary. Sufficient supply to dictate prices was the key. In 1960, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, and Venezuela formed OPEC, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, a cartel designed to manipulate oil prices through supply control. In 1973, during the Yom Kippur War, with the U.S. supporting Israel, OPEC, led by Saudi Arabia, imposed an oil embargo on nations supporting Israel. Oil prices quadrupled from $3 to $12 per barrel. By 1979, following the Iranian Revolution, oil prices reached $40 per barrel. The U.S. economy suffered severe repercussions. Gas lines, rationing, rampant inflation, rising unemployment, and a stock market crash. This oil crisis revealed a stark reality: America's dependence. OPEC now held the power, capable of holding the nation hostage. OPEC's newfound leverage yielded tremendous economic power. Oil-producing nations experienced overnight wealth, with Saudi Arabia transforming from a desert kingdom into one of the world's wealthiest per capita nations, amassing trillions of dollars. Politically, the U.S. was compelled to negotiate, forging agreements and guaranteeing Saudi security in exchange for stable oil prices, leading to entanglement in Middle Eastern conflicts to protect oil supplies, including 2 invasions of Iraq, partly driven by oil concerns. While OPEC lacked a complete oil monopoly, its sufficient control over supply to set prices profoundly altered the global landscape. The oil crisis imparted a crucial lesson: dependence on a strategic resource is a fundamental vulnerability. Control over a necessary resource equates to control over those who need it. This lesson is more pertinent than ever today, as China commands the strategic resource of the 21st century: rare earth elements, creating an absolute dependency. By 2025, China's control over rare earth elements is absolute. While most individuals are unfamiliar with them, these 17 metallic elements, including neodymium, dysprosium, lanthanum, europium, and terbium, are indispensable to modern technology due to their unique magnetic, luminescent, and electrochemical properties. Neodymium is crucial for the magnets powering electric motors, essential for every electric vehicle and wind turbine. Dysprosium enables these magnets to function at high temperatures, preventing motor overheating. Europium and terbium produce the red and green hues in screens found in every smartphone, laptop, and television. Lanthanum is used in camera lenses and batteries, while cerium is vital for catalytic converters. Yttrium is integral to LEDs and lasers, and the list continues. Without rare earths, the production of smartphones, computers, EVs, wind turbines, solar panels, MRI machines, fiber optics, and advanced weapon systems is impossible. An F-35 fighter jet utilizes 920 pounds of rare earths. Virginia-class submarines require thousands of pounds, and precision-guided missiles depend on rare earth magnets. Modern militaries cannot operate without them, and China holds the keys. The development of this dominance began as follows. Rare earths are not intrinsically rare. They are relatively abundant in the Earth's crust. The challenge lies in their dispersed nature and low concentrations, mixed with other elements, making extraction difficult and environmentally hazardous. In the 1980s and 90s, the United States was the leading global producer, with the Mountain Pass mine in California supplying a significant portion of the world's rare earths. China then entered the market, leveraging lower costs, lax environmental regulations, cheap labor, and government subsidies for production. By the 2000s, Chinese rare earths became more cost-effective than American ones, making U.S. companies unable to compete. Consequently, the Mountain Pass mine ceased operations in 2002. By 2010, China controlled 97% of global rare earth production. Today, China mines approximately 70% of rare earths and processes over 90%. Processing is the critical element. While rare earth ore can be mined elsewhere, transforming it into usable metals involves complex chemical processes to separate, refine, and produce the specific compounds required for manufacturing. China established this infrastructure, while the US, Europe, and Japan did not. Consequently, these regions became dependent on Chinese rare earth processing. Domestic capacity was dismantled because sourcing from China was cheaper. This has led to a critical impasse. China's rare earth monopoly confers significant economic power. China can dictate prices. In 2010, a temporary restriction on rare earth exports caused prices to skyrocket tenfold overnight, triggering global panic and underscoring China's indispensable role. It also grants military power. Every advanced weapons system relies on rare earths, rendering the US military completely dependent on Chinese supply for critical components like F-35s, missiles, and naval vessels. The Pentagon acknowledges this as a strategic vulnerability with no immediate solution. Politically, China can leverage rare earth access for geopolitical advantage. Access to rare earths can be conditional on aligning with China, avoiding sanctions, or supporting its positions, with the threat of supply cutoff capable of causing economic collapse. This is the power of monopoly control, and China possesses it. The extent of this dependency is profound. The United States imports 80% of its rare earths from China. Europe imports over 90%, and Japan imports nearly 100%. There are no viable substitutes. Electric vehicle motors cannot be manufactured without neodymium, and smartphone screens require europium and terbium. The technology is fundamentally reliant on these specific elements. While other rare earth deposits exist in Australia, Canada, and the US, developing mining operations takes years. Establishing processing facilities requires a decade, meaning even immediate action would leave these nations a decade behind China. During this period of dependency, China is fully aware of its leverage. In 2019, amidst US-China trade tensions, Chinese state media explicitly threatened to halt rare earth exports, sending a clear message of indispensability. The US subsequently softened its stance. Examining the overarching pattern, all four historical examples, Britain's coal, America's oil, OPEC's oil, and China's rare earths, follow an identical six-stage progression. Stage 1, resource discovery, occurs when a material is identified as essential for a new era of civilization. Coal-fueled industrialization, oil-powered transportation and modern warfare, and rare earths are the bedrock of digital technology and green energy. At this point, the resource is recognized but not yet strategically dominant. Stage 2, infrastructure development, sees one nation build the necessary systems for large-scale extraction, processing, and utilization. Britain developed coal mines, railways, and steam engines. America built oil wells, refineries, and highways. China constructed rare earth mines and processing plants. This stage is a decades-long undertaking requiring substantial investment, expertise, and foresight, granting a significant initial advantage to the nation that leads. Stage 3, monopoly establishment, is reached when one nation or group controls a majority of the supply. Not necessarily absolute, but sufficient to influence prices and dictate terms. Britain controlled over 50% of coal in the 1800s. America, over 50% of oil in the 1940s and 50s. OPEC, over 40% of oil in the 1970s. And China now controls over 90% of rare earth processing. Once this monopoly is established, global dependency commences. Stage 4, global dependency, occurs as the rest of the world becomes reliant on the monopolist. Industries are built assuming uninterrupted supply, economies are structured around access, and military strategies incorporate the resource. Finding easy alternatives becomes increasingly difficult. Nations rivaling Britain needed coal for industrialization. America's adversaries required oil for modern militaries, and the contemporary world needs rare earths for technological advancement. At this juncture, the monopolist wields maximum leverage, enabling wealth extraction, term dictation, and geopolitical control. Stage 5, monopoly exploitation, is when the monopolist actively utilizes its leverage through overt or subtle means. Britain employed coal dominance to maintain its empire. America leveraged oil supremacy for global hegemony. OPEC used oil leverage to gain wealth and political concessions, and China is now employing its rare earth leverage to advance its geopolitical objectives. This is our current position. China holds the monopoly, the world is dependent, and China is capitalizing on this advantage. Stage 6, monopoly collapse, eventually arrives. Competitors develop alternatives, new resources are discovered, technology evolves, or the monopolist overreaches, provoking a backlash. Britain's coal monopoly ended with industrialization elsewhere and the rise of oil. America's oil monopoly waned as production peaked and OPEC emerged. OPEC's influence diminished with increased non-OPEC production and the development of alternatives. China's rare earth monopoly will eventually dissolve, but not imminently and not without significant repercussions. We are currently at stage 5. China possesses the monopoly, the world is dependent, and China is exploiting this leverage. The warning signs are evident. Warning sign 1. Complete supply chain dominance. China controls every aspect of rare earths, from mining and processing to refining and manufacturing components. No other nation possesses this integrated supply chain. While the US now mines some rare earths, with Mountain Pass reopened, the ore is still shipped to China for processing, only to be re-imported as refined metals. This is not independence, merely dependency with additional steps. Warning sign 2. Lack of short-term alternatives. Establishing rare earth processing facilities requires 7 to 10 years, and training a skilled workforce takes years more, with expertise development spanning decades. Even if the US and Europe began building capacity today, full independence would not be achieved before 2035 at the earliest. China is acutely aware of this decade-long window of dependency. Warning sign 3. Escalating demand. The need for rare earths is surging. Electric vehicles requiring 10 times more rare earths than gasoline-powered cars are increasingly replacing conventional vehicles. Wind turbines are being deployed globally, with each requiring hundreds of kilograms. The proliferation of electronics, phones, computers, and various devices further amplifies rare earth consumption. By 2030, rare earth demand is projected to triple, with China controlling the supply. Warning sign 4. Weaponization. China has already brandished the threat of restricting rare earth exports. In 2010, during a dispute with Japan, China curtailed rare earth shipments, causing panic in Japan's electronics industry. In 2019, China issued similar threats to the US during trade tensions. While the full measure has not yet been taken, the threat remains palpable. As United States-China geopolitical friction intensifies, particularly concerning Taiwan and international commerce, the potential for weaponizing critical materials escalates. A significant indicator of this trend is warning sign number 5, the strategic stockpiling of essential resources. The United States Department of Defense does maintain a reserve of rare earth elements, but this cache is notably insufficient, capable of sustaining only a few months of military equipment fabrication. It would prove inadequate during an extended period of armed conflict or a comprehensive economic blockade. In stark contrast, China has been actively accumulating substantial reserves of these vital minerals, diligently building up its supply and positioning itself to leverage rare earths as a crucial bargaining chip in any future global disputes. This situation carries profound implications for various facets of our society, impacting the global economy, national security, and our everyday lives. Should China decide to curtail its export of rare earth materials, the repercussions for the world economy would be catastrophic, leading to a complete cessation of activity rather than a mere slowdown. This would mean an immediate halt to the production of new consumer electronics, such as iPhones, the development of electric vehicles, and the manufacturing of wind turbines. Existing manufacturing operations for electronic components would cease within months, and global supply chains would unravel. Major corporations like Apple, Tesla, and Samsung, all heavily reliant on Chinese rare earth supplies, would face production standstills, triggering widespread stock market collapses. From a national security perspective, the United States military's operational capacity would be severely compromised without access to rare earths. A cutoff would prevent the production of new weaponry, bringing vital programs like the F-35 fighter jet and missile manufacturing to a standstill. The technological superiority that the US military has long depended upon, including advanced guidance systems, stealth capabilities, and sophisticated sensor technology, all critically require rare earth elements, and our current dependence on China for these materials represents a strategic vulnerability of immense proportions. The impact on daily life would be equally disruptive. Imagine a scenario where a broken smartphone becomes irreparable due to a lack of replacement parts, or a defunct electric vehicle cannot be replaced with a new one. The inability to acquire new computers would become a reality. This is the potential consequence of a disruption in rare earth supply chains. The intricate mechanisms of the modern world fundamentally depend on these materials. Now, a frequently posed question arises. Cannot we simply discover alternative materials or develop domestic mining operations to break free from this dependency? While the answer is technically yes, the timeline for achieving this is far from immediate. The potential for domestic rare earth extraction exists, with the United States, Australia, and Canada possessing significant deposits. For instance, the Mountain Pass mine in the United States has resumed operations, and new mining ventures are being explored. However, mining constitutes only half of the challenge. The critical bottleneck lies in the processing of these extracted materials, a complex undertaking that requires substantial infrastructure development. Building the necessary processing capacity is a process that typically spans a decade. China, it is worth noting, invested 30 years in establishing its extensive processing capabilities, whereas the United States aims to achieve a comparable level of development in a significantly shorter time frame, perhaps 10 years. Success in this endeavor is not guaranteed, and in the interim, a considerable degree of vulnerability persists. The search for substitutes is also underway, with researchers investigating alternative materials for magnets and screens that do not necessitate rare earths. Nevertheless, these technological advancements are not yet fully mature, and even if breakthroughs occur, widespread commercialization would still require years to implement. Recycling offers another avenue for mitigating reliance, as rare earths can be recovered from discarded electronics. However, the current recycling infrastructure is rudimentary at best. Furthermore, recycling efforts alone cannot meet the projected demand. The United States generates approximately 1.5 million tons of electronic waste annually, yet less than 1% of the rare earths contained within this waste are effectively recovered. The majority of this valuable material is either sent to landfills or transported to China, where it is processed and subsequently re-exported back to the United States. The unvarnished reality is that the United States and other Western nations have made a significant strategic miscalculation. We have allowed China to gain a monopolistic hold over a resource that is demonstrably vital to our technological and economic infrastructure. This was a consequence of prioritizing short-term cost savings, leading to the outsourcing of production and the dismantling of domestic industrial capacity, thereby fostering a profound dependency. China's ascendancy in this arena was not a matter of chance. It was a meticulously planned strategy. As Deng Xiaoping famously stated in the 1990s, the Middle East has oil. China has rare earths. He recognized the profound strategic significance of these elements and invested accordingly. China developed its mining operations, constructed processing facilities, and implemented production subsidies that effectively drove competitors out of the market, thereby securing a dominant market share. This control has endowed China with significant leverage, comparable to the power Britain wielded with coal, the influence America historically held with oil, or the leverage OPEC possessed in manipulating global oil prices. Dominance over a strategically crucial resource bestows superpower status, and China currently holds this position with rare earths. To contextualize this, let us examine historical resource monopolies. Britain's control over coal lasted approximately 100 years, from the early 1800s to the early 1900s, eventually waning with the industrialization of other nations and the emergence of oil as a primary energy source. America's dominance in oil persisted for roughly 30 years, from 1945 to 1975, before its influence diminished with the rise of the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC. OPEC's leverage endured for about 15 years, from 1973 to 1988, weakening as non-OPEC nations increased their production and global demand shifted. China's rare earth monopoly began to solidify around 2010, and we are now approximately 15 years into this period. Unlike previous resource monopolies, China's hold is actively strengthening. The nation is intensifying its investments, expanding its production capabilities, and further solidifying its control over supply chains. Instead of resting on its laurels, China is actively entrenching its position, and the window of opportunity to extricate ourselves from this dependency is rapidly diminishing. Throughout modern history, control over a vital resource has been a defining factor in global power dynamics on 4 notable occasions. Coal was instrumental in the rise of the British Empire. Oil underpinned American global hegemony. The strategic control of oil by OPEC dramatically increased its economic and geopolitical influence. Currently, China's dominance over rare earths is establishing its leverage over the entire developed world. The historical pattern remains consistent: dependency, followed by leverage, and ultimately, a potential collapse of the dominant power. We are currently in the leverage stage, a phase that could persist for decades. During this time, China effectively controls the very resource that fuels modern civilization. Every technological advancement, every sophisticated military system, and every solution for green energy is contingent upon supply chains originating from China. This is the essence of the rare earth trap, and we are undeniably caught within it. Some dismiss these concerns as alarmist, positing that market forces will naturally resolve the issue, that alternatives will emerge, or that China would hesitate to disrupt supply, given its reliance on Western markets. However, this viewpoint echoes the same arguments made by rivals of Britain concerning coal, America's adversaries regarding oil, and OPEC's customers prior to the oil embargo. Dependency, regardless of its origin, creates vulnerability. When one relies on a rival for something as fundamental as rare earth elements, a precarious position is unavoidable. China is acutely aware of this dynamic, as is the Pentagon. The crucial question is whether the public grasps the severity of the situation and whether collective action will be taken before it is too late. Presently, China holds a strategic advantage, having positioned us in a state of dependency, vulnerability, and with no immediate recourse. This is the power inherent in controlling a strategic resource monopoly, and it defines the rare earth trap. If this analysis has altered your perspective on the future of technology, geopolitics, and global power, please consider subscribing. When China ultimately wields this leverage and the rare earth crisis becomes undeniable, understanding the underlying causes and consequences will be paramount. The historical precedent is clear, having repeated itself 4 times: coal, oil, oil again, and now rare earths. Each instance demonstrates how control over a crucial resource has dictated the trajectory of global power. History offers the answers.